Good morning, everyone. Today, let's talk about garlic. It's getting to be late in the fall season, and that means it's getting to be close to time to put garlic in the ground for next year. One of the core principles of making sure that you have healthy, disease-free garlic is rotating the beds that you plant garlic in. So given it's getting very close to time to plant garlic, it's a good time to go over some of the other diseases that can impact garlic. So we can look at making soil amendments or other things that need to be done to the ground before we plant the garlic for next year's harvest. So garlic spends 8 to 9 months in the ground developing. And part of what happens there is you put it in the ground over the winter so the roots can develop and get strong, because it's going to have to grow that big root bulb next year from a tiny little clove. So you put it in the ground in the fall and you let the roots start to develop, and they'll be there all winter long. They'll survive the freeze. And then next spring, it'll be ready to start developing and sending up the shoot that will send down energy in the spring and summer to develop the bulb of garlic for the fall. But all that time in the ground means it is susceptible to several bacteria and fungi, especially if the ground is wet. So white rot, Fusarium basal rot, and Botrytis neck rot are all rots that affect the clove of garlic, while downy mildew and rust are more symptomatic of the plant itself and the leafy greens, so that's more the next year. The one that we're most worried about preventing in the fall when we plant is the Fusarium basal rot. That's the one that sets up because it's damp and not well drained. So this time of year we can amend the soil with compost or organic matter to make it drain better next spring and all winter long while the garlic's growing, to prevent that fungus from taking hold. White rot and Botrytis neck rot are important to rotate your crops to keep those pathogens from infecting in future years. So this is white rot, and you can see there all those little dots. Those are sclera, and that's what stay in the soil and reinfect it year after year. So this is the one, if your garlic or onions are affected by this, you need to keep them out of that bed for at least 8 years to try and kill this pathogen. You could solarize the soil, put a black tarp over it, and really heat it up to try and make that happen quicker. But even that has its efficacy is not super well proven. So it's better to just to keep it out for one, and then for two, if you do get it, just not plant in that area and practice good biosecurity and keeping that diseased tissue not in other clean parts of your garden. Those are the main ways that you can prevent white rot once you get it, but it impacts the bulb of garlic. Downy mildew is the next one we're going to talk about, and that impacts the leaf of garlic. And you can see right here that leaf is all wilted and dying. And downy mildew really likes high humidity, so you're going to see this in the early summer, and it likes wet, moist, damp environment. So if your plants are too close together, that's another way that you're going to have issues with downy mildew. A way to prevent it is to space your garlic cloves 6 to 8 inches apart. That gets you good airflow to set you up for a bigger harvest next fall. Another preventative tip is to water early in the day and to keep it off the foliage, the leaves. That way they remain dry and you can keep the fungus from proliferating. Rust is the next disease we'll talk about. You can see this one also affects the foliage, and it's these orange lesions that are all over the green leaves. This one shows up a little bit later in the summer. It likes cooler temperatures but high humidity. So you'll see it happening in midsummer in the early mornings. It is when it's going to proliferate the best. This one, there's 2 different ways to kind of stop it from spreading in your patch. Is you can either get disease-resistant cultivars, and that will essentially keep it out of your garden because you're resistant to this disease. They were bred to deal with rust pressure better. And then if you don't have one of those resistant cultivars, you can apply sulfur dust. There are organic safe products that are in full compliance that provide that relief and that same dusting ability that cuts down on the fungus pressure. Fusarium basal rot. This is the one that impacted our raised beds last year. We didn't have the best drainage. They were a little wet, so the bottoms of our garlic bulbs rotted. And this stunts them as well because that root's not growing as well. It's not feeding the leaves as well. The leaves then don't in turn feed the bulb as well. So they're small and stunted in addition to having some diseased tissue that's inedible. But it's a soil-borne fungus. It does attack onions as well and leeks, and it impacts that basal plate of the bulb, so the bottom part of the bulb right where the root's attached to it. Cleaning your garden well afterwards to make sure that there's no diseased tissue remaining in the garden is one prevention step. Rotating crops is an even better prevention step, but then the best prevention step is to make sure that the beds drain properly. This fungus can't take hold if it does not if it's well drained. It needs a very moist environment to really proliferate and impact the bulbs. The final one, this one occurs a bit more in storage. It's Botrytis neck rot, and that's where the onion bulbs the garlic bulb starts rotting from the top down. A lot of these injuries happen while you're harvesting and then proliferate and spread because we don't cure them properly. So if you cure and dry the garlic properly, it can prevent a lot of this bacteria from proliferating and killing the garlic bulb. So how do you cure it appropriately? Well, you put it in a warm, dry, shaded area for 2 to 3 weeks to allow the bulb to finish drying out completely. Because when you harvest the garlic, the bottom few leaves are still green. So it needs to dry further. And if you let it dry in that warm, shaded area, then it will dry down enough that there isn't the moisture appropriate for this disease to proliferate, to grow, to wreak havoc on your harvest. Then the other prevention step is trim the neck. So when you're first drying that garlic, leave the little bit of stem on it and don't trim the neck down until 2 to 3 weeks, until after the bulbs aren't moist anymore. So the best way to prevent disease is to keep it out of your garden. How do we keep garlic diseases out of our gardens? We rotate beds every 3 or more years. 4 is better, but I understand if you're tight on space, 3 years is best. Space the garlic cloves apart appropriately. So 6 inches is a minimum, 8 inches is better. Water early in the morning and allow the leaves to dry, and water at the base. Sanitize your tools, especially if you already have white rot. You don't want to take that to another part of your garden. And then for Botrytis neck rot, make sure we're curing those garlic cloves in a warm, shaded area for 2 weeks. And then when we store them, it's in a cool, dry location, so there's no moisture for these molds to proliferate. A good rotation schedule for garlic can be garlic and then beans after that, because it fixes nitrogen in the soil and recharges the fertility for next year's crop. Put in cover crops of rye, oats, or clover are an even bigger added benefit of improving that nitrogen and the fertility of the soil. The third year you can grow kale, lettuce, something like that. It's different than onions, so it further breaks pest and disease cycles because it's not even, they don't even share the same host pathogen. So, and then the third year you're ready to go back to garlic again. A fourth year would be even better, and you could do squash or something like that. That's another one that breaks the pest cycle. It does take a little bit more of the nitrogen out of the soil that those beans fixed, but you could replenish that with a cover crop. So those are some good ideas of how to rotate to make sure that we're keeping garlic in garden soil that doesn't harbor pathogens for it. If you're looking for what to do, like I said, this garlic disease prevention checklist works really well. So go and read the post and download it. I hope everyone has a great day.